Hello, everyone. I am Julianne Meyer. You are watching Own Your Wellness. Happy New Year to those of you who are just joining us in the new year now. Excited to be here. Today's guest, I met him, I think it was December. Yeah, December. And I'm excited to bring him on because he is a surprising man with many, many talents, or I should say, the Doug Thompson. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Julianne. How are you? Thanks for pointing out who I am. Anybody can be a Doug Thompson. There's a lot of them out there. Politicians. There's other things. So there's a comedian. So I'm gonna have to replace him on stage one day, I think.
My husband is a comedian, so
Wow.
I don't know. That's a rough gig.
Yeah, I've known some. Then it's not something I'll venture into. I employ humor because if you can't laugh in life, if life's way too long in that case. But
Amen.
if that's the paying gig, that's a hard one. I got respect for him.
It is a hard gig. I mean, that's not his main thing, and he doesn't really do it as much anymore. But yeah, I'm familiar with the back end of things more than most. So anyway, we're not here to talk about him. We are
All
here
right.
to learn more about you and how you
Sure.
show up in the world. So I'd love for you to share a bit about yourself and how you got where you are.
Sure, I'm just a small town country boy from East Texas. I grew up there. I've traveled around a lot. I think I lived in a station wagon for a couple of years when I was just born, but I never intended to be like working in tech or these other things. I didn't have a life planned out per se. I found things that interested me and then pursued those until I was either not effective, not learning, or something else came along that did. I had worked for Microsoft for 20 years before in tech, 20, 30. It all runs together after a bit, but I've been in tech for most of my working career. But I found a love of story. I have been a storyteller all my life. Like we can go into a little bit of history later, but I've got my podcast. I do some keynote speaking now. So really sort of helping people tell their story,
Mm-hmm.
unlocking that is a key passion of mine as well.
I love that. Most people think about speaking in public and like, what would I say? And, how could I do that? How can I be in front of all these people? And you do it on a regular basis, not only on stage, but also with your podcast. And what would you say to somebody who says, I don't have a story to tell?
Well, I would call BS on them. And actually, my TED talk that I did, I sort of talk about that. I said, think about when you're conversing with your friends, and in there I use sort of a funny thing. I've said, in your case, you just got a new pair of jeans, and you're going, these things make me look really good, and just you're just telling a story to your friends. Nobody's going to, especially if you're on stage, nobody's died from being on stage. Your husband is probably a good example. I mean, he's up there and the worst that can happen is they don't quite get it, but there's always tomorrow, and you learn something from it. So you've got a story to tell, and more importantly, the reason being is that if you impact one person, there was somebody that just the other day that they impacted one person that stopped them from killing themselves. This was something like that because they had heard this other person's story, gave them hope or gave them something like that. So it's actually your duty to go out and tell your story, and it doesn't have to be a big audience, but big audience, small. I actually find a big audience is easier to do because you'll have some fans out there. And
Mm-hmm.
then sometimes one it's a little harder. Sometimes you just hit and miss, but a big audience, there's always somebody out there who wants to be your fan.
That's a really good way to put it too, because I would say I've always done way bigger in front of big audiences than the small ones, because like you said, and
Mhm.
also, I don't know, it's less intimate in a way. For me, it's easier because it's just, it's less real. I don't really know how to describe it other than it's just easier for me. But, I like this idea of it being your duty to share
Mhm.
your story.
Yeah, I mean, and I think going to your point, the bigger audiences, as there's this, not to get sort of all the aura and stuff, but there is this energy that's exchanged between the
Hmm.
audience and the speaker that
Hmm.
you can't duplicate anywhere. So, I mean, virtually you get a little bit of that when you can see their face and stuff on that. But when you're in there in person and there's atoms and electrons and stuff going back and forth that you can't duplicate anybody else. It's a very positive experience. So I think that's what, again, the bigger it is, the more energy there is in the room.
Hmm.
But the way we learn things is through story. Our brains are wired to listen and learn from stories. It goes back to the caveman days. If you look at, before you even had a language more than grunts and stuff, you had cave drawings, you had stuff that told a story, because that's the way the brain is sort of designed. And there's brain science we could go into later. I go into my TED talk, but stories are the most impactful way of sharing information and learning between people. It's very intimate, yet not intimate in a weird way.
Yeah, exactly. No, it just, and plus, when you can relate, when you can internalize even just a little bit of it, it's definitely much more impactful. And I think too, a lot of people don't realize, nobody is rooting for you to fail when you're on stage. Right. Nobody's up there thinking like ready with the tomatoes,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
They're not looking for all of your mistakes. They're looking for the message.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, and that's the key thing is what can you make that connection? So it's a little bit about connection as well, and stories help us connect. If you think about even your childhood and stuff, you have memories, and there's always a story around the memory that comes in. It's not simply a flash and then goes away. There's always something associated with it. I hear a song that I played in band in high school, and I still brings tears to my eyes sometimes, because I remember the situation where it was played, or it brings a smile or something like that. Or when you have kids, the same thing. So very, and that's why, again, that's why stories are so impactful.
They really are. And, I think about it too, because we tell, like you were saying, we tell ourselves stories all the time. We make up meanings we're meaning making machines. We're telling ourselves some sort of story constantly. Like, as a female, why didn't he call me? What's good? Does he want to break up with me? I mean, I can't even tell you how many times that story I told myself in my head when I was a teenager. And one of my favorites was, my high school sweetheart who loved me. And I remember we were at his house for prom. My dad had a big old camcorder out. And I remember thinking to myself, he doesn't think I look attractive. And I had this whole story in my head about how he didn't think I looked pretty. And I watched the tape like years later, and all I could see was adoration on his face and in his eyes. And just like, and I thought, man, I spent that entire night being upset with him for no reason.
Well, you bring up two things. One, I'm familiar with that situation because I raised two daughters. So I'm very familiar with that part of it. And the second part is that it's human nature to look for the negative in things. And it's our subconscious mind that comes in, that's designed to protect us from dinosaurs or bears or what have you, that comes in. And because we don't really have a lot of dinosaurs and bears running around anymore, it starts to invent things to protect us from. Right. And in your case, the story you're telling is trying to protect you from being hurt. What's going on? You're trying to get early warning and stuff. And it takes some effort to not sort of fall for that, because it plays on instant reruns 24/7, 365 in our head if we let that negative story go. And that's why I start off the morning with meditation, because I want to sort of get into a positive mindset. And I'm not, the sky is always blue. There's that piece of it that's not always positive. But when you're faced with a situation, what can you find out about it? Is it true? Is the subconscious really doing you a favor here or not? And I say, I tell mine to show me the receipts where I can't go do this, right? Going back to I can't speak in front of people. Why not? Where's the receipts that you can't do that, right? And if you just sort of have to start questioning that thing. But I'm sorry, I sort of got off on the read, but that's the way a lot of people, they get caught into, I can't. And it's like Henry Ford. If you think you can, if you think you can't, you're right. Either way.
Yeah, I love that saying, because it's so true. And I'm with you where I can't even tell you how many times. I'm just speaking for myself. I mean, I see it in other people, obviously, because it's always easier to see it in other people. But
way easier than in other people.
I'm like, listen, I see you. But this idea of I can't, it's like, why can't I? Why? It's asking better questions. Yeah, I really like that a lot. You mentioned a little bit about like the brain, and I'm always interested in, because I have a science background, and I'm always interested in, it's funny because I love the stories, and the way that I really learn is through stories. But I love to know the science behind everything, because there's science behind everything.
Yeah.
So I'd love for you to talk a little bit about, you mentioned that before. I'd love for you to
Sure.
touch into that.
Lisa Cron, I got her book up here. She wrote a book about the brain's wired for stories. That's where I use that thing. And she goes into the way that the brain works. If we actually look at the way our brain or memory will store memory, some people you conflate the two things. And I do talk about it in my TED talk a little bit. But, we've got this finite, think of it from the computer perspective. I got this finite amount of RAM that I have, and that's to keep me alive. That's to avoid the bear, do these other things. So it's very transactional. It wants to be here and now to make these instant decisions. 90% of our decisions and stuff are made from our subconscious mind or the mind that doesn't really do anything. It's just it's a recall. And it needs to do that to automate tasks for us to live, right? Because again, we got this finite amount of memory to actually to work the day's problem or the current problem that's in front of us, or answering this question that you just asked. I've got to get this from this. And so it's the way the brain works. So with stories, because it goes back to our unconscious mind, stuff that we don't, it's like breathing. We actually have to think about breathing, but because it's in our unconscious mind, we know how to do it. Right. So like if you go hold your breath and you try to do that, that's working against what your subconscious programming tells you to do. And if we can free up that stuff to where we're thinking more towards the positive piece of things, and we have the receipts and stuff that helps us sort of connect. But I mentioned getting teary-eyed from a song that I heard. That's an emotional part of the brain that kicks in and that's why the more parts of your brain you can engage in a story. So that's why we like books that have texture and it has a storyline. One is predictable, right? We sort of like a predictable storyline, but it has visual, it has, emotional, it has, again, audio or these other things. The more of those things you can tie in, the more lasting that memory is. Right. And then the more times you repeat that, it's like, affirmations are, that's another subject, that you can debate that. But an affirmation, I look at it from the perspective, it gets me to thinking, I can do this. And I look for things that prove that look for the positive. It's like, you buy a red car, all of a sudden there's thousands of red cars around when you swore when you bought it, nobody had one. Right. It helps tune you helps that 10% that you have, helps tune you into what's sort of active and out there. And you can help augment that. But like I said, the last thing I do before I go to bed is write 3 things I'm grateful for the day, to try to close on a positive note. And I can't repeat it. I can't. Well, I'm thankful I didn't assume room temperature. That doesn't work. It's a good thing, but that's not really something to be grateful for. I'm going to be grateful for we had this conversation. That'll be one of the things I put. But it puts you in your subconscious in this mind so that your dreams and stuff should help reinforce more of a positive type thing. So again, waking up in the morning, for me, everybody's a little bit different, helps me look for more optimistic things, if you will. And so my stories, when I tell them, sometimes they don't have positive endings. Sometimes they're bad, but they're, here's the thing after that. What did I learn from it that I can avoid to repeat from it? So the brain is very complicated, but then again, it's this way it works is fairly simple in that if the more things you can engage in a story, again, telling a story more than just facts. That's why you all fall asleep in a statistics class. Normal people do, because it's all numbers. There's no story behind that. Other than I've talked to some mathematicians and they're creating a story around those numbers in their head. So it all depends on where you are. But that's the way that's the way the brain works. Again, it's pulling a lot of stuff out of recall. And as I get older and I don't access some of those things as much anymore, it gets a little bit harder to put that story together. And that's another challenge as you age. My mother's got Alzheimer's, and that's a horrible way to go out. You're just sort of a prisoner. You don't remember things. And I don't want to ever happen to do that. I want to go out Mach 2 with my hair on fire. I'm halfway there. You can see I got the hair on fire. Hair's gone. So.
I love this idea of, I do the 3 great things that I'm grateful for in the morning. And I write them down too, so that I'm introducing more ways to get my brain to work on that path. Like you said, it has to be different stuff. And it's funny because some mornings it's really easy. And then other mornings I'm like, but
Yeah.
it gets me going, and there's always something.
My guess is your inner bully was very active that night before that you couldn't find it, was telling you all these negative things, and it gets harder to turn that on. I call my inner bully Simon, by the way.
I
So
like that you named him.
makes it easier to address him.
It does, doesn't it? Yeah, I'm with you though. What I tend to do when I go to sleep is listen to something on YouTube that is positive. That's like it's maybe like a sleep meditation, or it's just something to end the night.
Yeah.
I remember when I was working in addiction recovery, it was fascinating to me how many clients would sit there and watch Law and Order and like all these crime shows and things right before bed too. And I just thought, it's fascinating, and you're trying to overcome addiction. I feel like there's something there.
Or you doom scroll Twitter or X or whatever it is anymore, and it's just like, okay, that's not the way to sort of just set yourself on a good path. And I like it. Your day's inverted from mine, and that's fine because that works for you.
Yeah, it doesn't have to look the same, right?
Right, exactly. You have to find what works for you. Sometimes a middle of the day type thing is good. I'll get in an afternoon, and sometimes I'll listen to some music that's like 828 megahertz and stuff. So listen to some of those frequency type things that sort of, again, your brain is a very weird thing. And I'm always trying something different to see what works with it. You go back to some ancient, Chinese or whatever, things that have been around for a long time that they've tried. And I said, well, let's go give this a try. It's been around for a bit.
Yeah.
And then you always have to do is it a placebo effect? Right. So you have to throw that in there. Is it just because but sometimes does that really matter?
Yeah, exactly. Am I getting the result?
Am I getting the result? Does it placebo or not? It really doesn't matter.
It's kind of like, I don't really know. I mean, I have an understanding of how electricity works, but I don't need to know how it works in order to use it. Exactly. I don't have to prove that it does, because I guess the proof is that I'm using it and it's working. So
exactly.
No, I like that idea too. But something that I picked up from a friend of mine back when I worked in addiction recovery, because as you were saying before, like, life isn't always peachy. And when you're in that kind of environment, it is not peachy most of the day. And you have to take things and joke and like make it as lighthearted as possible, because you're dealing with serious life and death stuff all the time, and traumas and all of that. But one of my friends, and I thought this was brilliant, sometimes she'd be on her way into work and she would be in a foul mood. So she would be like, you know what? Let's start this day over. She would get out, go back into her car, drive around the block, and come back in. It's like, I'm going to start over.
It is. You have to find that a way to sort of even out your emotions and stuff. And again, I'm a very positive person, optimistic, but not to the part where the sky is always blue. I know it's not, and you have to work through some things, and we're going to go through it. Yeah. And when you think you've got the world, just it's all going to be always blue, then God has a way of sort of intervening, saying, "Oh, not so fast, there, buddy.
Time to grow.
Time to grow.
Exactly. We need some rain."
Yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, if you see, I got the triathlon posters behind me. I've done 2 Ironman triathlons. I'm suffering from bad knees now and about to get one replaced. Oh. But it's that taught me. I grew up with asthma. At the time I grew up, you had to sit on the bench during PE. You didn't do anything because they thought you would die.
Oh.
And through my youth and all that, that's what I lived with. I got to be in band. I was able to do that, but I didn't get to play any sports. And then as I got older, science comes around and found, well, exercise is actually good for the type of asthma that I had. And so I started training these things and doing it, and getting to the starting line healthy was most of the battle. But, I had 17 hours to finish the race, and I finished both of them. But you learn about a lot of mental games, the mental games. I'd heard about it before. I battled Simon the entire time. Say, look, you're an old fat guy. You shouldn't be doing this. You did. It's like, shut up. So it is interesting how you do those things, and you come up and you grow up and things change.
It is fascinating to me. And I just love, like you said, that bully that you named him Simon. Because because you get separated from you. You
Yes.
know,
Yeah.
it's less.
Yeah, I think you need that distance, right? Yeah, I think you need that distance. And mine's got a British accent, and he wears T-shirts a lot.
I
And
love
if you
it.
sort of know who I'm inferring about if you ever watch American Idol or anything, but because he says things to people nobody would say to, and that's your inner bully would say things to you you would never tell anybody else.
Exactly. Well, it's funny too. I have this saying with other people, you know, when they talk bad about themselves, and I say nobody talks about my friend like that, including you.
I like that.
Yeah, you're not allowed. No, nobody's allowed to talk about my friends like that in front of me. So sorry, but anyway,
like
we
that.
do. Isn't that fun? I like it. And then they're kind of like, oh. Okay. But we do need to go to a commercial break. So for those of you who are watching us live, thank you so much for being here. When we come back, we're going to continue this conversation and how to maybe work through the Simons in our life. We'll be right back in just a minute. Welcome back, everyone. If you're just joining us now, today's guest is the Doug Thompson. Let's bring him back onto the show. Welcome back.
I was exercising and jamming along with the commercials there. That was pretty good.
They're kind of fun. They're kind of peppy.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah, so it was funny because during the commercial break, my friend sent me this stuff. It's Chakra Boost. And she has a little store in North Carolina in Nashville, and it's like a scent and it's for communication. And so I put it on my hands and I sniffed it, and it's interesting how now I associate that with doing interviews and puts me in a better mood too. So it's kind of,
again, you're touching different parts of your brain, getting exactly that. Again, the scent, it's like a sound or something else that goes on. Yeah.
Exactly. So I thought I'd bring that up because, you know, that's why if you're studying for something, you try and create as much like the testing side as possible so that it feels the same.
Yeah, I've taken some of these exams for my certifications and stuff, but I don't want to duplicate that environment because I think it's like a prison cell that you're in.
I hear you. Yeah, for me, it's more like if I can't listen to music while I'm doing it, I'm not going to listen to music.
Exactly. Yeah, it's sort of funny to be able to do that because I'll get in, I'll play music when I went into creative mode,
Mm-hmm.
And it shuts Simon up a little bit too, because you can't have a couple things. So I get in that mode, and a lot of it's music that, I had training music I do. Okay, this is a really hard interval day, and there'd be certain beats that went along with it to go do that. Or when I'm in the gym, same thing. So, we all do these, and we don't think of it as a story. We don't think of it as what it's doing into our brain, but it's all part of the storytelling that's going on.
Well, speaking of storytelling, I would love for you to tell us a little bit about your podcast and how that came about.
It's sort of funny. I got a friend of mine that I work with that was in radio back. So I was this morning sports guy back when I was in my 30s. This is back where you had cartridges still. It wasn't digital. When you did a remote broadcast, there were no cell phones. If you ever watched WKRP in Cincinnati, that was very accurate of what the world was like at that time. We all had those characters that were around. And so I was a sports guy. This was a side gig for me. I really started out my career as a copier technician. So if your copier broke, I was the guy that came out and fixed it. But yeah, I did this as a side gig because, again, I liked talking to people and going in and doing things. But I realized that sort of was a very transient lifestyle. You had to move around markets, and I couldn't do that to my family at the time. So I did it for a few years, and then I'd sort of forgotten about it. And then as I sort of grew and I started doing some lives on LinkedIn, and I loved listening to podcasts, I said, well, I'll just start my own and interview people that are good storytellers, have interesting stories to tell. And that's where we're sort of at today. I mean, I've gone through a couple of this. I'll be doing my 7th season coming up.
Oh, wow.
Interviewing some people, and I sort of vary sometimes I did one season was me doing monologues. I call it the technology tour guide. Because it was always, there was things like, well, when you go into a bathroom and you have these infrared faucets, why is it the first 3 you try don't work? Well, there's always technology, and there's a story behind the technology of how that comes out and works. So that's what I started doing. I started doing something similar now on LinkedIn lately, but the podcast came out because I like to talk and interview people and learn from people, much like you.
Yeah.
And tell stories. The podcasting, the best way to do that is going back to the radio days without the reel-to-reel tape where I had to splice it together to get the highlights and stuff. So it's sort of funny. It's a circular type thing that I'd never made that connection. And now you can do it without having to have all the other overhead that goes along with it.
I actually really like that because I see things coming back around in my life too, where it didn't make sense. It kind of, for me, it was almost like a one-off. And then all of a sudden it's back in my life again, just an updated version. I'm like, oh, maybe that is just kind of how I communicate or.
We're attracted to things, I think.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
So I'm assuming that everybody can find your podcast on all the usual places.
All the usual haunts, yeah. The main thing, Spotify. I go through that. So did start adding video to that this last season, and there's some YouTube as well, which I port stuff to. I'm still trying to figure out what to do with that. But it's a conversation. I try to keep it around 20 minutes. So if you did commute or you had something, it was sort of a short attention span that you could learn things. My favorite, I loved Mike Rowe is sort of he's a mentor. He doesn't know it yet, but he's a mentor of mine in that I used to listen back in the days. I used to listen to Paul Harvey on radio. I'm dating myself. This was way back to AM days, but he would do this thing called The Rest of the Story. And it was a story that he would tell, but he would tell it almost in reverse. You didn't know who he was telling the story about. Learn the backstory and all these other things until finally at the end of 5 minutes, you'd find out who that person or event was. And Mike Rose sort of did that with the way I heard it. He sort of reinvented it as that. And they weren't little short things. But it's interesting when you, again, getting that brain to work about, okay, now I'm trying to put all this useless history together that I learned in school. Oh, that's the story behind what went on, and it's a different story structure, but I've always been attracted to that type of thing. And I didn't realize, and again, is part of my learning that I am a storyteller. I went back to a high school reunion. I won't tell you how many decades that was. It was a while, and that we had all the memorabilia from class, that came around, pictures, and things. And they had, in this book, they had a tardy slip. It was all handwritten. This is all.
Oh, yeah.
And it said, I was late to class because a Coke truck dropped all its, Cokes on the road and I couldn't get by. And it was signed by me. And I'm like, wait a minute. So I've been telling stories a long time. I didn't even realize it. And it got approved. So obviously it was pretty impactful. I was able to, luckily they didn't have social media and the stuff that they do now that could prove me wrong. But, I've been doing that for a bit, and I'm doing some reflection. The times that were most exciting and stuff were times when I was telling story or speaking in front of people, doing different things like that you can get that exchange of energy and you can see those lights go off.
It's funny. It's funny because I had this friend in high school named Alex, and he was always late to first period, and every day without fail. And our teacher, instead of getting just pissed, like at first he was just mad because like, why can't you be on time? But then it turned into what's your reason for today? And if he liked the reason that he came up with, then he wouldn't get in trouble. But if he didn't like the reason, then he would get in trouble. But the funny thing was this one time, because he rode his bike to school, Alex rode his bike to school, he got hit by a car. And he really did get hit by a car. Wow. And he was telling that story, and the teacher didn't believe him. He's like, but he didn't get in trouble.
But I did.
He's like, I really did.
That's funny. It reminds me of an old TV show MASH, where Klinger, the Corporal Klinger, was always trying to find some reason to go home, and he had this big list of things. Mother died, and it's like, well, wait a minute, your mother died, but yes, it's just sort of
again.
Funny. Yeah, again.
Oh, that's funny. So speaking of, as usual, storytelling, you mentioned that you've been in a couple of races that are Ironman. Oh my goodness. You and I had that conversation about how I'm doing an Olympic triathlon, which is like this big in comparison.
That's a quarter the size. You're fine though. That's a perfectly reasonable limit for people that are reasonable.
Well, it's my first one out the gate. So I figure I might as well go for it, like as far as that's concerned. But I'm already, I've just started training for it, and there's already stories that I'm telling myself. Yep. And especially start tomorrow, or it won't really matter if you, all those types of things.
Yeah.
But, what kind of things what did you learn about yourself, even training for, let alone doing these?
Yeah. I mean, the doing it is a different aspect of it. So the training of it, because it's like a 6-month training period. Well, let me tell you how I got involved in my first one. My wife had lymphoma, and we just moved to Washington State, and I wanted to do something to support her. So the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society have these team and training events where you go sign up, you raise money for the organization. And that way it would support what my wife was doing, but they would help you do things that you hadn't done before. Mm-hmm. And so my mentor in the first one, and this was going to be, and it was an Olympic, I think it was an Olympic distance of that. And I'd done some 10 years before, but I've sort of retired. Mm-hmm. And so I was, okay, fine. Well, I'll get in doing these things again. And he had the best, he still to this day, he has the best job title I've ever heard. He worked for New Belgium Brewery, and his title is Beer Ranger. That's like the best title ever. So he was a route salesman, but he had done marathons and stuff. So anyway, we completed that. And he says at the end of this thing, we're sitting around and sort of having some beverages. He says, hey, they got an Ironman over in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. It's the first one. We should do that. I said, dude, look, I've finished an Olympic distance. I'm good. I'm an old fat guy. I shouldn't be doing this. Here, have another beer. So it's like 4 beers later. It was really sounding like a great idea, and we signed up. And so it's like $500, and I was like, okay, well, I've got money on the line now. I need to show up and do it. But then it got to be a little bit of, can I do this? And there were mornings you get out, and I never had a run in my entire career where the first mile felt good. It was, the whole time I was like, you need to go back to bed. This is horrible. You're not going to, you have to sort of go through that. The bed's nice and warm, and it's rainy out right now. Just go back to bed.
Or I'll do it later.
Yeah, I'll do it later when it's sunny. And I found if I didn't exercise in the morning, I probably wasn't going to get it done. Right, because work would come up or something, or it gets easier to do that. I could beat my bully into submission early in the morning while I was still asleep. and go. But after that first mile, it would feel good. Things would start going on. You loosened up to do that. So it was just showing up every day, fighting that bully to say, hey, look, I need to go do this. Now, that's not to say I didn't miss some training and stuff. If I'd have missed one more day, I might not have finished. That was like, here, what's the minimum work I can get done and still survive this thing? But so you're showing up healthy, but I wasn't going to be overtrained for the event. But it's those things. And I got to ride with a group of people. Like the riding that you find is the longest period of time that you have. And it's better with a group to go do, because we go like on an 8-hour ride on a Saturday or something like that. That's a lot of time to be by yourself if you had to do that. But I had some 4 or 5 hour runs that were rides that were by myself. The training by myself taught me to sort of deal with you need to quit and bag it, demon that was inside, which was good, because on race day that would come into play. But it's just showing up every day, even if you make just a little bit of progress, or maybe if you make no progress, but you showed up that day and did something.
Yeah.
That is important. You're putting money in that sort of in the exercise bank, or whatever you want to call it. And so come race day, I'm healthy. I found out the 2 weeks before race, you do what they call a taper, which means you're not really doing a lot of exercise, which is really odd. You find out how much your body craves exercise and the stuff that went into it in those 2 weeks when you're not. They said, hey, dude, get off the couch. I didn't have that problem with going in the morning, because like, man, we should be going like for a 5-hour ride.
Yeah.
No, we can't do it. I had to, like reel it back a little bit. The body was aching, and I'm like, I'm never going to make it. I hurt so bad now. And you show up on race day, and there's a crowd, and getting back sort of like the speaking, you have that energy you can pull from other people. You got all the other athletes around you. You start off on the swim, which you and I had that discussion. That's going to be the worst part for you, not because of the swim, but because you're in a washing machine with everybody else that's in there. Very strange feeling. When we're team and training, we used to do this exercise. We'd put everybody off in one corner of the pool, take all the lane ropes down, and then we'd make them swim across over each other, so they got used to that feeling of being thrashed around.
Yeah.
Because it's scary. And there's no line on the bottom, and you can't, a lot of times it's so murky you can't see your hand in front of your face. But going and getting through that, and I would just say, okay, look, I'm going to get through the swim. I was luckily my body size, and I was a decent swimmer. I'd get through that about mid-pack, a little bit ahead of mid-pack, I'd say. Get on the bike, and then an Ironman, you have to learn to eat. You've got to get calories in there. That was more art than science, and always depended on what the weather of the day was. Because what tasted good at 70 degrees didn't usually taste very good at 85 or 90 degrees, which I had. But you got to get the calories. You can't store enough. Even big fat guy like me can't store enough to get through an entire race. And then you get through that, and then you get to the run, and you start seeing people dropping out. And you have this demon. In the first race that I had, I was 70 miles into the bike ride, and I was uncomfortable the whole ride. Again, I was like, I need to quit. You really shouldn't do this. This is just stupid. You're dealing that inner bully. And as I've started climbing this hill, and I'm so low on calories because the food I had tasted bad. I couldn't eat it. I'm literally falling asleep on my bike while I'm riding up a hill.
Oh, wow.
And I get to the top, and the aid worker there gets up and says, how you feeling? And I said, well, I don't feel so good. He said, that's strange. You don't look so good either. Here, have a seat in this chair. And I'm sitting in the chair, and he had this frozen banana. And so the potassium and it was a hot day. It was 100 degrees out. It was the hottest race they had. And I sat there and just like, this is so good. And you had the angel and the devil sitting on your shoulders. Says, the bully was a little kinder, says, look, you're an old guy. You did good to get this far. Starts trying to sell me on this.
Yeah.
And the angel saying, could you live with yourself? It gets back to that thing where, pain is temporary, but, quitting's forever. And so I had this battle going on for about 5 minutes. I saw another guy came by. He was actually bleeding he'd already fallen off at some point, but he kept going. I said, look, I can't live with myself if I'd quit.
Yeah.
So I got back on the bike and pushed on, and that guy, they did carry him off in an ambulance just a few miles down the road. But I found during that at about mile 70, 80, that's going to be the worst part of a race for me. That's when I'm at I call it the pit of self-loathing. I was hating life. I was hating everything. All the negative, as much negativity as you could possibly imagine was hitting at the time. But if I pushed through that, I started feeling a little better. I started going these other things, and so I could get on and finish the race. But I finished the first one, and I had like 40 minutes to spare.
Oh,
but
wow.
You get the energy from the audience that's there, from the people cheering you on, people you don't even know. And it's dark. I can hear voices, but I can't see them because they're doing it from their porch or these other things. And it's like, that goes back to reinforce when you're speaking. There's people out there that, and again, they're not rooting for you to fail. They're not rooting you for to do this. And it just simply made me get through, pull me through. So it's inevitable. You can do a lot more than what you think you can.
Yeah.
It's a lesson that I think you can push your body a whole lot further than what you think you can. And the same thing is with your mind. You can push it a lot further than what you think you can and go do things, tell these stories, go do things that you don't think are possible. You can do it. You just have to sit there, show up and put in the thing, and don't listen to the negative salesman.
I like that. Yeah, I'm always like, thank you very much, but I don't believe you today, or I don't believe you right now.
Yeah, you have to find your own. Yeah, you have to find your own way to quiet them down, or to
exactly. And it doesn't always, like you said, your own way. It doesn't look the same for everybody, and just don't give up until you figure it out. It's like, I mean, for me, it's different depending on the day. Sometimes I'm like, shut up.
And sometimes if you acknowledge the fear, I understand. I'm not your prototypical triathlete, but here's the things that I've done in the past to start reflecting your gratitude, if you will, on the things that you have accomplished. Yeah. And sometimes if you acknowledge that makes it a little bit easier to quiet that. Okay, subconscious, I realize what you're trying to do and I appreciate that. But here's some things that sort of go against what you're trying to tell me. Yeah. And we've done this. So just calm down. I know what I'm doing. We'll make it. So sometimes it's not the direct assault like you just said. Sometimes you need to have that. But other times.
Sometimes, around the back end.
Exactly. The story's not the same that you use to go do that.
It definitely depends. All right. So we do need to go to one more commercial break. When we come back, we're going to continue this conversation because not only for those people who haven't or have no intention of doing an Ironman, this is life only on steroids. So, so we'll be back in just a moment. Welcome back, everyone. Let's bring Doug Thompson back to the show.
I'm back and better than ever.
I like it. So, during the commercial break, I was just thinking about this, the conversation about you doing this because it's for those of, I guess I'm an athlete too, but I still appreciate Ironman. To me, that is like, so beyond anything I think I could ever do. So I appreciate that. But I think that a lot of people too don't realize how much their life is like that. Like, you're talking about that inner bully and Simon just sitting there talking like at mile, what was it, 70? Like 70.
Yeah.
And it's all negative all the time. It's like,
Yep.
but if you can push through that,
Yeah.
it's like that with anything, because, we've been talking about how life isn't always roses and rainbows and unicorns and all that fun. It just isn't. And to try and pretend that it is, it doesn't serve you in any way. But if you can make it through that and just keep pushing through, then there's always something on the other side of that. Always. That's better than where you are at that moment.
Yeah, no, exactly. If you're going through hell, just keep on going.
Exactly. Don't pause. Don't sit in it.
Yeah. And it's sort of funny because, this is a 17-hour microcosm, of life, as you said, that you go through in a day. You start off at 7 when a lot of people are going and you're exercising. And the only difference is you're actually paying a lot to go do this. It's an option. You don't have to do it, but it is sort of, there's a lot of things in life that do that. Be it your first job out of school, or, we've all had jobs most of us had jobs that we didn't really sort of fit in. In my 20 years at Microsoft, there were different roles I had that weren't, they look good from the outside, but once I got in there, they were not really, you're always learning about yourself and what lights your fire. And I mean, it'd be nice if there was an instruction manual. I give this talk to college kids that are about to graduate college, and so your career doesn't have a syllabus, because they've been through this program where here's the syllabus, here's what it takes to be successful.
Yeah.
Right. That's the parameters of their life, but your career, you don't have that. It's not there. You're making this crap up as you go along. And if you're open to learning and trying and failing, that's one thing that concerns me about the group that's coming out now, is the way the education system's so set up, to be top of your class or be in this, failure is not good for them, and they don't learn how to necessarily cope and recover from that. The resiliency piece that comes from that.
Yeah.
And when they get into the early stage of career, I see them, they're afraid to fail, which means they're also afraid to attempt that Ironman or what have you that would take them to another level of going to do something.
Well, yeah, to me, it's like failure is the way to success. You can't not have any failures to get there. So,
right.
I mean, that's the way.
Yeah. Your husband can tell you have good sets and you have bad sets.
Exactly. And they don't always work. And that's the thing too. Same thing with life. It's like what might work for one crowd and you kill it isn't for the next one. It's like, what?
Yeah. I learned that from my storytelling and speaking piece of that. I'd say early on, but it was about 25 years ago. And I went to Microsoft. They were having this, what they called road show for the system builders. This is back in the day when every street corner had somebody selling PCs. They would build their own and stuff and all that. So there were like thousands of them all over the U.S. And they would do the show when they'd come out with a new operating system. And I said, okay, look, I'll go do this thing and get paid to go speak and talk nerds. And I got there, and there's 10 of us in the room, and it was a prep week to here's what you'll present during this thing. And the guy that was running it, he's an enigma from a technology perspective, in that he was a Broadway actor. He had hair. I mean, he was out there, but he understood technology and how to connect with people, how to tell the stories that connected with people. And so we're in this class, and I'm watching this guy that comes up. I call him the professor because he had this tweed coat with elbow patches and very distinguished. And I can appreciate that style. And I tried to be him all week. And as you probably guessed now in the 40 minutes we've been talking, that didn't work so well. That's not me.
Yeah.
And so I went and talked to my wife, who's my coach at times when it comes to, look, you can't be anybody else. You got to be yourself. So I took some things that I liked, and this is a tip for anybody who wants to be a speaker, is take some things that you like and appreciate, see how you turn it to your own, how you can be yourself. I did Ironman triathlon. I don't necessarily work it for anybody, recommend it for anybody, but for me it worked. Then there's some things there from a mindset perspective that'll help you that come on. So Yeah, it's all about learning all the time. You never know everything.
Exactly. I keep thinking about like this whole idea of the syllabus because we are really, and like, oh my gosh, it's so true. We think if we do this, we get this.
Yeah, exactly.
It does not work like that. I mean, sometimes,
Right.
right? But then it's like we're sitting there scratching our heads going, well, what did I do? You didn't do anything wrong per se.
Yeah.
Just
In that situation, it didn't work, right?
yeah, it just didn't work. Yeah,
Yeah.
for whatever reason. And the other thing too that I wanted to mention about school that I think is really lacking is it's where I think there's this disservice nowadays. And I'm not saying this hasn't been like the case even when I was a kid, but this idea of do it on your own.
Mm-hmm.
That's not how life works. Like you work with people. So
No, it is. I mean, we collaborate on different things and in the project, and sort of like what we're doing on this show here. There's always you're strong, you're better together. You're better, with other people to help make each other better, and you can challenge each other to raise your game. I find that I always try to step up to the game. I'm always looking for somebody that's better than me.
Mm-hmm.
So that I can then raise my game to whatever they do. When I was racing, I was always looking for the person in front of me that I could try to pass.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And it's that way to sort of challenge yourself to go and to be better. If you're not growing, you're going backwards because, all the other successful people are growing.
Well, and that's the thing too. Like one of the examples I love to give is I was a personal trainer for years. And so obviously I know how to work out in the gym. I know how to get the results and I know all that. I have a personal trainer. And the reason why is because I probably won't show up for myself like that.
There's no consequences if you don't show up for yourself, right? Yeah.
So it's not about like, it's just like, okay, you just use what you have.
Yeah.
I'm not going to try. I can sit there and try and convince myself that I'm going to do it. I probably won't. So why not?
Yeah. But it does make you a better listener. So I haven't thought of it that way or something. So getting that different perspective from somebody else.
Exactly. And I don't know everything. That's the thing too. And I can't see the forest through the trees. Yeah. So it's like, same thing like with working out. I can't necessarily see if my form is bad.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. The mirror lies to you and you can't exactly see. And
oh yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I'm not going to sit there staring at myself the entire time either.
Yeah, exactly. That has its own problems.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Exactly.
It is. I've had coaches. I have people that I work with and it's, I don't necessarily take 100% away from them what they have or do it 100% the way that they do it. Again, here's a concept or here's something that I've learned that I can build upon.
Yeah.
To make myself better. I mean, I worked with somebody that you talked about the chakras. I worked with somebody who sort of walked through that, which I hadn't experienced before. But in the way that we walked through some of the exercises, I realized there were some things in my background that I just assumed, you just grew up. But they were actually holding me back from playing bigger than what I had in just a couple lessons that I had. I said, I understand that now, right? It's again, the subconscious is protecting me as it had for all these other times. And, it's amazing when you see that you get that aha moment that comes up and it's like, wow. And that's why when I do my TED talk, I thought I did the reel I played in my head was an Academy Award winning TED talk that went on, but the one that I delivered, I didn't feel I couldn't watch it for the first year that I did it because I just too close to, that wasn't the way that I'd envisioned it to go on. Inner bully, you stink. Right. Chiming
exactly.
in. After that year, I had some distance. I watched, I said, and other people are telling me, that was really good. That, they helped do these. And I always ask somebody, well, what did it help you do when we leave? And I had this young man came up and he had like 4 pages of notes that came up and drew, and he asked me a couple follow-up questions. That's why I speak. That's because I that one person, that one ripple in the lake, I've changed that person's life that can then go, I don't know how many other people they may touch. But I've made the world a little bit better one person at a time. So again, if you got a really big audience, the chances you are finding that one person or more than one person, if you're really fortunate.
Yeah.
It's just, that's why I do it.
I love that. Well, we only have 1 minute left. So is there any I know it comes up quickly. Any final thoughts or anything you want to reiterate for the audience?
Yeah, if you got a speaking gig, reach out to me. I'm happy. I'd love to talk to you about what goes on. Again, I'll be the easiest speaker you have to work with. You can reach me. There's my website, podcast, the Doug Thompson podcast. I'm the Doug Thompson on all social media. On LinkedIn, I'm probably the most active. But I really appreciate the time here, Julianne, and great conversation. And I love what you're doing.
Well, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure to speak with you today, always. And I will probably be reaching out again, asking you questions about my race.
Good luck on that race. I'm here for you.
I appreciate that very much. Anyway, everyone, that is all the time that we have. Thank you for being here. We will be back again next Thursday. Until then, enjoy the rest of your week.